David Letterman's coffee mug slipped from his hand when Joan Rivers stopped mid-joke, her famous smile vanishing in an instant. Paul Schaefer's hands froze above the keyboard. The audience went silent, and for the next 8 minutes, the sharpest tongue in comedy didn't tell a single joke. Instead, she told the truth about what it cost to be a woman in a business run by men. And what happened next would be so raw, so devastating, that NBC would debate for weeks whether America was ready to see it. This wasn't Joan Rivers the comedian. This was Joan Rivers unfiltered, unguarded, and unforgettable. It was a Friday night in November 1983, and Late Night with David Letterman was in full swing. The show was still relatively new, just over a year on the air, but it had found its voice. David Letterman, 36 years old with his trademark curly brown hair and self-deprecating wit, sat behind his wooden desk in Studio 6A at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, shuffling through his blue cue cards. The monologue had crushed. The audience was hot. Paul Schaefer and the band were cooking. Everything was clicking perfectly. Letterman glanced at his notes for the next guest and smiled. Joan Rivers, one of the funniest people in show business. Sharp, fearless, and always good for great television. 30 seconds, the stage manager called out. Letterman straightened his tie and looked into the camera as the red light blinked on. "Welcome back," Letterman said. "Our next guest is one of the funniest people I know. She's been doing stand-up comedy for over 20 years. She's a regular guest host on The Tonight Show, and she's got a new book out. Please welcome the hilarious Joan Rivers." The audience erupted into applause. Paul Schaefer hit an upbeat, jazzy riff on the keyboard, and the band kicked into a bouncy groove. And from backstage, moving with that confident, theatrical energy, Joan Rivers walked out. She was 50 years old, dressed immaculately in a gold sequined blazer over a black blouse, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless. She had that familiar wide smile on her face, the one that had become her trademark, and she waved to the audience like she owned the room. The audience loved her. They were on their feet, cheering. Joan walked over to Letterman, who stood to greet her. They hugged briefly, and she kissed him on the cheek, leaving a lipstick mark that made the audience laugh. "You got a little something," Joan said, gesturing to his cheek. Letterman wiped it off, grinning. "Thanks for that. Anytime, darling," Joan said, settling into the guest chair. She crossed her legs, adjusted her blazer, and immediately radiated that electric Joan Rivers energy. Quick, sharp, always on. Letterman sat back down. "Joan, it's great to have you here." "Well, I'm thrilled to be here, David. Although I have to say, this time slot is brutal. Who watches television at 12:30 in the morning? Insomniacs and criminals, that's who." The audience laughed. Letterman grinned. "You're not wrong, but you're doing great," Joan continued. "I love what you're doing with the show. It's smart, it's different. You're not trying to be Johnny, and that's refreshing." "Thank you," Letterman said. "That means a lot coming from you. You know Johnny better than anyone." Joan's smile flickered for just a second, so brief that most people wouldn't notice, but Letterman noticed. "I've been a guest on The Tonight Show many times," Joan said carefully. "And I've guest hosted for Johnny quite a bit." "How many times have you guest hosted?" Letterman asked. "Over 80 times, Joan said. The audience murmured, impressed. "That's incredible," Letterman said. "Do you enjoy it?" "I love it," Joan said. Her voice was bright, but something in her eyes had changed. "It's the biggest platform in comedy. Every comedian wants to be on The Tonight Show. And guest hosting? That's the dream. Is Johnny grooming you to take over someday?" Letterman asked casually. The question hung in the air. Joan's smile froze. She looked at Letterman for a long moment, and something passed between them. A recognition, maybe, that they were about to go somewhere real. "No," Joan said quietly. "He's not." Letterman paused. "Really? With 80 guest hosting spots, I would think." "David," Joan interrupted gently. "Can I be honest with—" "Of course." Joan took a breath. The audience was completely still now, sensing something shifting in the room. "Johnny Carson will never give me the show," Joan said. "Not because I'm not funny enough, not because I'm not good enough, but because I'm a woman." The silence in the studio was absolute. Letterman blinked. "Joan, It's okay," Joan said, holding up a hand. "You don't have to say anything. I'm not attacking Johnny. I love Johnny. He's been good to me. But the truth is, NBC will never let a woman host The Tonight Show. Not in my lifetime. Maybe not ever." Paul Schaefer had stopped moving at his keyboard. The camera stayed locked on Joan's face. Letterman leaned forward. "Has anyone told you that directly?" "They don't have to," Joan said. I can see it. I've guest hosted more than anyone except Johnny himself. I've proven I can do the job. But when they talk about Succession, when they talk about the future of the show, my name never comes up. It's always men. Always." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now, something raw. "And the thing is," Joan continued, "I've worked twice as hard as every man in this business. I've done more sets, more clubs, more road gigs than any of them. I've written my own material. I've fought for every single opportunity. And I'm still seen as the funny lady, the guest, the fill-in, never the main event." Letterman's expression had changed completely. The ironic distance was gone. He was just listening now, fully present. "That must be incredibly frustrating," Letterman said quietly. "Frustrating?" Joan let out a short, sharp laugh. "David, it's devastating." What Joan said next would stop everyone cold. Joan uncrossed her legs and leaned forward, her hands gripping the armrests of the chair. The famous smile was completely gone now. In its place was something else, something tired and hurt and angry. "Do you know what it's like?" Joan said, her voice lower now. "To be the funniest person in the room and still not be taken seriously? To kill every single time you step on stage and still be treated like a novelty?" Letterman shook his head. "No, I don't. I'm 50 years old," Joan said. "I've been doing this for 22 years, and I'm still fighting for the same respect that men get handed on day one. I'm still fighting to be seen as more than just funny for a woman, as if being funny has a gender, as if the ability to make people laugh somehow changes based on what's between your legs." The audience was riveting. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were wiping their eyes. "I watch men who are half as funny as I am get their own shows," Joan continued. "I watch them get development deals, primetime special, movie roles, and I'm grateful for what I have. I really am. But there's this ceiling, David, this invisible ceiling that I keep hitting my head against, and no matter how hard I work, no matter how good I am, I can't break through it." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Letterman's eyes were glistening. "Joan, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," Joan said, more forcefully now. "I don't want pity. I want opportunity. I want fairness. I want to walk into a network meeting and not be the only woman in the room. I want to pitch a show and not hear, well, female-led shows don't do well in this time slot. I want to be judged on my talent, not my gender." She stopped, breathing hard. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights. "And you know what the worst part is?" Joan said, looking directly at Letterman. "What?" "I've spent so much energy fighting to be taken seriously as a comedian that I've neglected being taken seriously as a person. I've made myself smaller. I've made myself more palatable. I've laughed at jokes about women that I didn't find funny because I didn't want to be difficult. I've smiled through meetings where men talked over me because I didn't want to be emotional." She laughed bitterly. "I've become so good at playing the game that I forgot I was playing it." Letterman put his hand over his mouth. His eyes were red. The stage manager was making frantic gestures from the side. They were running way over time. They needed to go to commercial. But Letterman waved him off. "Joan," Letterman said, his voice thick, "what you're describing, it's not right." "No," Joan said, "it's not. But it's reality, and I'm tired of pretending it isn't." She turned and looked directly into the camera. The red light glowed. "If you're a woman watching this at home," Joan said, her voice steady now, "and you're working in a field dominated by men, and you're tired of fighting twice as hard for half the recognition, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not imagining it. It's real, and it's not your fault." She paused. "But here's what I've learned. You can't wait for them to give you permission. You can't wait for them to see your value. You have to take what's yours. You have to fight, even when you're exhausted, even when you want to give up, because the alternative is accepting their limitation. And I refuse to do that." Her voice rose slightly. "I refuse to be told I'm not good enough because of my gender. I refuse to be pushed aside because I'm getting older. I refuse to let a room full of men in suits decide what I'm capable." She looked back at Letterman. "And if that means I never get the Tonight Show, then fine. I'll create my own show. I'll build my own platform. I'll prove them wrong, not because I need their validation, but because I need my own." The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building into something thunderous. But it wasn't the usual excited applause. It was different, deeper, more emotional. Women in the audience were crying. Some were on their feet. Joan wiped her eyes quickly, the smile starting to return. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to get so heavy." "Don't apologize," Letterman said, his voice rough. That was That was incredible, Joan. Thank you for being that honest. Joan took a deep breath, composing herself. Well, you asked about guest hosting. That's what's on my mind. Letterman laughed, a real laugh. I'm glad I asked. But Joan wasn't finished yet. Joan leaned back in her chair, her hands folded in her lap. The energy had shifted again. She looked tired now, but also lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. Can I tell you something else, David? Joan said. Of course. The reason I fight so hard, the reason I can't let it go, is because I'm doing this for every woman who comes after me. I'm doing this for the young female comedians who are watching tonight, who are wondering if they have a future in this business. I want them to know that it's possible, that they can be funny and successful and powerful, even in a world that tells them they can't. She looked out at the audience. I want them to know that they don't have to choose between being a woman and being a comedian. They can be both. They can be fierce and vulnerable. They can be beautiful and brilliant. They can take up space and demand respect. Her voice got stronger. And I want the men in this industry to know that we're not going anywhere. We're not asking for handouts. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for equality. We're asking to be judged by the same standard. We're asking for a seat at the table that we've already earned. The audience erupted again. This time, men were standing too. The entire studio was on its feet. Joan stood up. Letterman stood as well. He came around the desk and hugged her. A long, genuine embrace. When they pulled apart, Joan was smiling again. But it was different from her usual performance smile. This was real. Thank you for letting me say that. Joan said. Thank you for saying it. Letterman replied. Joan waved to the audience one more time, then walked off the stage. The applause continued long after she disappeared behind the curtain. Letterman stood there for a moment, not moving. Then he slowly walked back to his desk and sat down. He looked at the camera, his expression completely open. That was Joan Rivers, he said. And I think that's the most important thing that's happened on this show, maybe ever. He paused, gathering himself. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. The show cut to commercial. Backstage, Joan sat in her dressing room, her hands shaking slightly. Her manager knocked on the door. Joan, you okay? I don't know, Joan said honestly. I just said a lot of things I've been holding in for 20 years. You were incredible. Was I? Joan looked up. Or did I just commit career suicide? Her manager smiled. I think you just changed the game. When the show came back from commercial, Letterman was alone at his desk. He didn't bring out another guest. He didn't do a comedy bit. He looked into the camera and said, Joan Rivers came on this show tonight and told the truth about what it's like to be a woman in comedy, the barriers, the double standards, the exhaustion. And to all the women watching, we hear you. I hear you. And it's time for this industry to do better. He paused. We'll see you Monday night. The credits rolled in silence. The next morning, NBC received over 12,000 phone calls. Some were angry. I watch late-night TV to laugh, not to be lectured. Most were different. Thank you for letting Joan speak. I've never felt more seen. That was the most important 8 minutes of television I've ever watched. Network executives argued. Some wanted to bury the footage. Others insisted it mattered. In the end, it aired once and was never rerun, but the impact was immediate. 3 days later, Joan Rivers got a call from Fox, a new network looking for a voice. We want to give you your own late-night show, they said. You'd be the first woman to host one. Joan accepted. In 1986, The Late Show starring Joan Rivers debuted. Groundbreaking, controversial, and costly. It ended her friendship with Johnny Carson. She did it anyway. She wasn't waiting for permission anymore. Years later, Letterman was asked about that night. It's one of the most important moments in this show's history, he said. I didn't know what she was going to say, but it needed to be said. He admitted it changed. I started paying attention to who we booked, who we hired. I realized I'd been part of the problem without knowing it. Joan woke me up. The full episode still sits at NBC's archives. After Joan's death in 2014, fans pushed for its release. NBC eventually posted a 5-minute clip online. It went viral, over 10 million views in a week. Comments poured in. She was saying this in 1983. We're still fighting the same battles. Every woman in comedy owes Joan Rivers. The full episode remains unreleased, but those who were in Studio 6A never forgot it. One audience member later said, I went there expecting jokes. Instead, I watched a woman tell the truth. 6 months later, I quit my job and went back to school. Joan gave me permission to fight for myself. Paul Schaefer said it best. Joan walked on stage a comedian and walked off a revolutionary. She didn't tell jokes that night. She told the truth. Joan performed until her death in 2014. She never stopped working, never stopped fighting. In one of her final interviews, she said, "I only regret not speaking up sooner. I wasted years trying to be what they wanted." When did that change? November 1983. On Letterman, "That's when I stopped apologizing for taking up space." In Letterman's office, there's a framed photo of Joan from that night. Mid-sentence, unguarded real. Beside it is a note she sent him. "Thank you for not stopping me. Thank you for letting me be angry and honest. You gave me permission to be real." Joan. On difficult nights, Letterman looks at it, and he remembers the night Joan Rivers stopped performing and started telling the truth. And he tries to do the same, because sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop being funny and be honest, especially when it's hard.